Welcome to Unity this morning. Welcome everyone that's joining us on live stream. Today we're doing the Satsang service where we chant to connect ourselves with this greater power, this greater love we call God. And they say to sing is to pray twice. And Norma and I will be the call and Larry will be the response. And Norma's going to come and join us here in a second. Or you can just sit in the presence of this room and just let the affirmation that we're singing just move in and through your being. Closer than breath, you are the air. You are the air. Sweeter than life. Sweeter than life. You are here. You are here. I am a wanderer. I am a wanderer. You are my peace. You are my peace. I am a prisoner. I am a prisoner. You are released. You are released. Closer than breath. Closer than breath. You are the air. You are the air. Sweeter than life. Sweeter than life. You are here. You are here. I am a wanderer. I am a wanderer. You are my peace. You are my peace. I am a prisoner. I am a prisoner.
Good morning, everyone. There's a really bad joke that's used in churches. I'm going to share it with you this morning because it'll help you understand the point that I will be making today. This guy becomes very concerned about dying, as to whether he's going to go to heaven when he dies. So he speaks to his attorney and says, when I died, will I go to heaven? The attorney says to him, look, I can't answer that. I can do all the legal work that has to be done upon your death. I can even make a will for you now, and I can, appoint an executor for the will, et cetera, but I have no way to tell you whether or not you're going to go to heaven when you die. So the distraught man goes to his doctor and says, Doc, when I die, will I go to heaven? The doctor says, I can't answer that. I can keep you in the best possible health while you're alive. I can give you medications for any ailments you come down with and whatever, things like that. I can even recommend some dietary help. But I have no way of telling you whether or not you're going to heaven when you die. So then the man leaves very distraught and goes to see the priest. Says to the priest, look, when I die, will I go to heaven? The priest says, let me meditate on that. Come back and see me tomorrow morning. So the following morning, the distraught man shows up and says to the priest, well, will I go to heaven when I die? The priest says, I've got good news and bad news. The guy says, well, what's the good news? He said, the good news is you're going to heaven when you die. And he said, well, then what's the bad news? You're going this afternoon. And that kind of leaves the conundrum about heaven being separate and apart from us. And I think we could resolve that today, at least among this group of people here in Unity. We can resolve the whole idea of heaven being separate and apart. And it's actually related cogently in a single sentence in A Course in Miracles. Of course, it does a whole chapter on, and many, many chapters on it, but here's a single sentence defining the truth of heaven. Can we have this first PowerPoint, please? You can read this in the Course in Miracles text, the old book, 359. In the new edition, it's on page 385. Heaven is not a place nor a condition. It is merely an awareness of perfect oneness and the knowledge that there is nothing else, nothing outside this oneness, and nothing else within. Heaven is not a place nor a condition. It is merely an awareness of perfect oneness and the knowledge that there is nothing else, nothing outside this oneness, and nothing else within. People who think about heaven as being a separate place that one goes to, there's all kinds of strange ideas that go along with that. But, if it's a separate place that you go to when you die, when you got there, what would have to happen? You would have to learn how heaven operates. You'd have to learn what kind of consciousness is necessary to get on in heaven. Certainly, you couldn't get on in heaven with the same ego-centered consciousness that you embraced here in the world, that ego-centered consciousness which is the root cause of all deceit, all conflict, and all war in the world. That's what it is. If you don't get it, if you never contemplated anything, and you want to know what the sin underlying all sin is, you just have to look to that idea, meditate upon the idea that everybody in this world starts off and lives for a long time in the idea that he or she is a separate ego, body, mind. And that actually just generates this whole illusion of the necessity to pursue one's personal self-interest regardless. And some people do it to the best of their ability and don't really become as devious as some other people who just get to the place where they have no regard for anything or anyone else. They are going to try to get what they need for their desires, their demands. And so you can see how that idea of life, that definition of life, leads merely to conflict and disillusionment, really. Because it cannot, no matter how oriented you are toward getting your desires met and how successful you may be in doing that, you can never really control the conditions and circumstances of the world in which we live to that degree where you will receive everything you need to have, listen to it, because it's never going to go away. You will never be able to amass all that you would need to have peace of mind. And just ask yourself another question. Could you possibly ever be in heaven and not have peace of mind? So you're beginning to touch upon the whole truth of the idea of ego-centered consciousness. It's a consciousness that generates fear, and it generates it almost continually. It's like there's an underlying anxiety in us because we live in uncertainty about what may happen to me as I define myself continually as a separate body-mind in a world of separate phenomena that doesn't appear to have any regard for my desires and demands. So I have to really pursue them in a meaningful way. I need to do it in many different ways, and some of them are not legal, but all of them will ultimately fail. But what changes if the kingdom of heaven is where Jesus said it is, in the midst of us, within us and all around us, but we don't see it? Can you imagine that? He's saying that to, the Pharisees of his day who believed they had a handle on what was going on and what it would take to be accepted into heaven. But here's this upstart carpenter's son, carpenter himself, saying the kingdom of heaven is in the midst of you, within you, all around you, but you don't see it because you are beclouded by your birth in the world. What changes with the truth that heaven is in the midst of us is that it then becomes an understanding that heaven is a state of mind that can be attained and maintained now, whether in the body or whether in the ethereal soul awareness. It wouldn't matter, because once you have attained the consciousness, divine, heaven, you live in divine peace because you have divine insight. You are no longer simply operating from your own personal point of view. Your limited perception through the illusionary idea of yourself being a separate body-mind, which filters out the reality that you are not a separate body-mind. You are one with everything you look upon and everyone you see. How close are you to knowing that? Because that's your calling, and that's your destiny, and that's your heaven. That's your eternal awareness. That's the truth that makes you free of all concern, all worry, all doubt, all fear. So you can measure yourself with that. How close are you to that? And if heaven then is in the midst of us right now, where we are, what is it that is necessary to comprehend in order to enter that divine state of mystical peace, insight, joy, wholeness, and love? Well, what would be required if you know those were the elements involved in heaven? What would be required is this. It's simple and it's direct. It's simple and it's direct. And you can measure your place in consciousness when you look at this next PowerPoint. You can read this in Matthew 7:12, simple and direct. Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. And until you have the consciousness of God, where you do feel, know, and live in the awareness of everything being one, then this is the law, this is the truth that you must apply to your life. Implied also, never do anything to anyone that you wouldn't have that person do unto you, or anyone else do unto you. That's a blanket statement. In other words, if you leave this sanctuary today and you don't carry this with you, then you are still operating in such delusionment that your suffering is at your own hands. Because life is one. That's it. That's the way it's created. We were supposed to grow up and grow into it, live from it, and enjoy it. As long as we're living in the illusion of separation, myself and all that is not me, we live there by virtue of our own suffering and our desire to continue to try to be right. So really what you're trying to be is innocent, to prove yourself innocent by cherishing attack and illusion. That's it. You want to prove yourself innocent, but you're still cherishing attack and illusion. And so the real problem actually stems from our birth into the illusion. We're all born into the illusion. Very few people have enlightened parents who are, they're living in the illusion and still struggling to try to make it work. So you're born this infant. And what does the infant learn from its first breath on? It learns to cry out for its desires and to keep crying to get its desires and its attention met. And it grows that way. And of course, parents run to give the baby that desire, the food, the milk, the attention, the strokes, the cuddling, the warm blankets, whatever. But the baby cries out when it's not getting what it wants. So we grow up with this whole idea that the object of my life, in order to find pleasure, is to cry out and to want it and to seek it and to grasp it. So we're growing up from there, and we find different ways to try to manipulate the people around us to continue to give us what we think we need to be happy. And that's the flaw or it's not even the flaw. That, by the way, is what is referred to as the original sin. We're born into it. We're raised in the illusion of needing to get our own body, mind, consciousness well-fed, well taken care of, well-sustained, and everything else that goes with that as we go on in years. But the process was built because it gave us the ability to reflect the process was built that we should reflect and get to a place in our growth where we recognize that my demands from my personal limited point of view can never play out to fulfillment. There's something missing in all of this grasping for the things of the world. And we're supposed to be able to reach that place simply by reflection, because we're living every day, we're reflecting every day on what's going on with our thinking and our acting and our lives. And at some point we should realize this doesn't work. And if you don't think it works, you just have to look at people that are doing it to the nth degree, people that are seeking their own personal powers released and accepted by everything around them. You can see what an isolated, fearful, illusion-driven character that is. Sometimes you'll read stories about some super movie star, and Christian Bale is accused of one of these incidents, but there are a number of them. And when he was shooting Batman one day, one of the stagehands walked across the set because he wanted to reset a light. And Batman was supposedly was on the blue screen, sitting on the top of that building or something. And the guy walked by and setting the light, he made some noise, and Bale just jumped up and jumped all over this lowly stagehand. I mean, Bale's making $20 million for the movie. He's going to make it in about 5 weeks. And this guy will never see $20 million in his lifetime. And he's dumping all over this guy, and finally the guy has to be taken off the set. Maybe he was even fired, I don't remember. And you see something like that and you say, there's something wrong with Batman. You can do all the stuff, all the costumes, all the makeup, all the phony acts that they do for Batman, but if that's the character in the cape, he needs to wake up and find out that that stagehand is his brother. So we grow up with this whole concept of feeding our senses, our desires, our demands, our ego-centered nature, and it doesn't work. We get to a place where we should get to a place where we recognize that, and then possibly we start to seek a more expanded awareness of life, a more expanded way to live. And at that time, usually a book or a teacher or somebody invites us to a unity church or something. We start to hear things. For me, it was the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Somebody gave me a book about Edgar Cayce, and the things that he said penetrated the illusions of the world that I was living in. And so that was the beginning for me to step upon the path of true life. But somehow or other, it happens. And the world is set up beautifully because it's set up in such a way that it's going to upend your personal dreams and goals in some way. If it doesn't upend them, they'll always leave you in jeopardy. An ego-centered consciousness lives in jeopardy about what may happen tomorrow or in the next hour or in the future. And we're always trying to look at all the insurance we spend money on. Insurance. Got to insure myself, my car, my house, everything. And now you have to insure your dog, because the prices for taking care of a dog, medically is outrageous. It's through the roof. So here you are now, driven by fears. It's one of the reasons why we have, people taking all kinds of medication for their fears. I used to work on Madison Avenue for a short while for a multi-millionaire, and all he had on his desk were medications that he took for his different problems, stomach ulcers, high blood pressure, etc. The guy was 45 years old. I mean, it's unreal what was going on in his head, that his mind was doing to his body. But here we are. So if you live in the ego-centered illusion of separation, what you're actually living in is a state of ongoing, sometimes an attempt to not recognize it, ongoing anxiety. And so you're doing everything you can to quell that anxiety. And when you quell it a little bit, you think you're being successful in the world, but it doesn't last very long at all. So the Native Americans have an interesting way of telling their story about life. They tell a story about a man or a woman who's weaving a beautiful carpet. And they're weaving it, you see the weavings behind this carpet, and they're weaving a carpet of the world. But every time they get up and withdraw from the weaving, they go someplace, whether to the bathroom or to eat or to get some more yarn, this coyote comes up and takes the strand that's hanging from the woven unit and pulls on it and tugs and undoes the whole thing. The person comes back and has to start over. And so it is the story of living in the illusion of life, trying to make the world work, trying to make this tapestry of life from the illusion of separation. But the coyote, which is known in the Native American, most of the traditions, know the coyote as a trickster, a very sneaky, devious kind of character who will get what he seems to need from the world. Each of us is living at first, we're born into it, that ego-centered illusion. At the very least, we start to develop a feeling of being a victim of life. And you can see it as it has grown these days. So many people now, live in this victim consciousness. And therefore, they live in a state of almost continual resentment for others because they still believe that the blame is, it's worthy to blame those outside of them that are creating the life they're trying to live. But that's not it. There's a divine enlightened level of awareness called God consciousness. If you haven't gotten there, if you haven't experienced that, then you are living in victim consciousness to a certain degree. There's a part of you that feels like, gee, life just doesn't work, or life is bad, or life is unfair. Here's Eckhart Tolle. Let's take a look at this next PowerPoint. You can read this in his book, Stillness Speaks, on page 31. Almost every ego contains at least an element of what we might call victim identity. Some people have such a strong victim identity of themselves that it becomes the central core of their ego. Resentment and grievances form an essential part of their sense of self. Even if your grievances are completely justified, you have constructed an identity for yourself that is much like a prison whose bars are made of your thought forms. See what you are doing to yourself, or rather what your mind is doing to you. You can look that up. We have so many books on Eckhart Tolle. In fact, we have a table, and I even thought I saw a book the other day in our bookstore from Eckhart Tolle that's on sale. If it's still there today, I'm taking it out off of sale. You're not going to get it on sale. What this man is saying in his books is absolute, and it's true, and it'll bring you to the life you really want to be living. But in any case, the ego-centered perception of life is flawed, creating a never-ending state of anxiety out of which we blame the conditions and circumstances outside of ourselves, the people outside of ourselves. There's still some people blaming their mother and father for the life they're living. Okay, they're like 40, 50 years old. but my mother and father, they're the reason I'm so unhappy today. Please. Please. You know, take the affirmation, get over it. Okay, now we want to find a way to the pathway into the enlightened God consciousness. And it is here. It is the final step on the pathway of forgiveness. Can we take a look at this next PowerPoint, please? You can read this in the old text, 448, the new edition, 481. When you have looked upon your brother and sister with complete forgiveness, from which no error is excluded and nothing kept hidden, what mistake can there be anywhere you cannot overlook? What form of suffering could block your sight, preventing you from seeing past it? And what illusion could there be you will not recognize as a mistake, a shadow through which you walk completely undismayed? God would let nothing interfere with those whose wills are his, and serve it willingly, and could remembrance of what they are be long delayed. In other words, if you follow this path of looking past the seeming foibles, limitations that others may be foisting on your path, if you look past it enough, eventually all you'll be doing is proceeding to declare for yourself and everything around you. Listen to it. Listen to it. This is so beautiful. This is so right. The only thing you'll be doing if you do that, looking past all the foibles, all the confrontations on your path, looking right past them, eventually, all you'll be doing is declaring for yourself and everything around you peace. True peace. So here's our answer to life. Can we take this back again? We'll take it through one time. When you have looked upon your brothers and sisters with complete forgiveness, from which no error is excluded and nothing kept hidden, what mistake can there be anywhere you cannot overlook? What form of suffering could block your sight, preventing you from seeing past it? And what illusion could there be you will not recognize as a mistake, a shadow through which you walk completely undismayed? God would let nothing interfere with those whose wills are his, and serve it willingly, and could remembrance of what they are be long delayed? Could the remembrance of your divinity, of being one with everything you see and everyone you meet, could that remembrance and full-fledged joy that accompanies it be long delayed? No, it cannot. So we're going to practice the truth, again, which is what we practice every day here at Unity. Listening to our Tibetan bowls, allowing ourselves to be here without any thoughts of regret. Like there's people that come to these meditation hoping to get, some kind of a magic thing to happen. The magic can happen, but it will happen when you let it go. Get over it. So, as you sit here, just enjoy the beautiful tones of the Tibetan bowls, and if any regrets come to mind, let them go. And be here present. And when we get to the period of silence, you may want to use this particular affirmation. Everything I look upon, everything I see, is only God looking back at me. as we go forth from this meditation to those places we occupy in time and space, let us go forth in the greater awareness of being one with everything we see, bestowing peace and blessings for this opportunity in every moment. Let us feel gratitude. And to this, we say, Amen. We will take an offering for unity now in the manner of our COVID regulations, whereas you who are watching this on screen can also see these different ways to tithe to Unity of Boulder so that we can continue the ministry here that goes on all week, every day of the week. And so what we do is we bring to mind that financial gift we'd like to make to this work that takes place here in Unity of Boulder. And as we bring that gift to mind, let's bless it with this offering affirmation. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, because I give. And so it is. Amen.
Yeah.